From the library of the New York Stock Exchange at the corner of Wall and Broad Streets in New York City, you're inside the Ice House, our podcast from Intercontinental Exchange on markets, leadership, and vision in global business. The dream drivers that have made the NYSE an indispensable institution of global growth for over 225 years. Each week, we feature stories of those who hatch plans, create jobs, and harness the engine of capitalism. Right here, right now at the NYSE and at ICE's exchanges and clearinghouses around the world. And now welcome inside the Ice House. Here's your host, Josh King of Intercontinental Exchange.
The little town where I live, New York City, has about 8.5 million residents and a municipal budget of nearly $100 billion. And nearly $1 billion of that will be earmarked for the New York City Department of Information Technology and Telecommunication, which, according to its website, is responsible for maintaining the core IT infrastructure and systems that touch every aspect of city life, from public safety to human services, from education to economic development, crossing the full spectrum of government operations. And, it makes sense that to keep a city like New York running in the modern world, that millions, if not billions of dollars are needed to provide the technology to keep government services on par with the population it serves. The efficiency of our city's bureaucracy can be saved for the topic of another episode, but at least I can say that gone are the days that a simple interaction with the local government required hours spent in line, paper forms filled out in triplicate, manual processes requiring fleets of city clerks rubber stamping documents. That's for the folks who live in a big city, but listeners of this podcast also know that I spend a lot of time up in a hamlet in upstate New York, the little burg of Wyndham, gem of the Catskills, whose year-round population probably doesn't eclipse 2,000 people and has a slim budget of just around $6 million. No one would expect a small town to provide the same level of services and infrastructure as a metropolis, but the need to modernize is still the same. Increasingly, local governments are expected to provide levels of transparency, data protection, and digital accessibility of not just the largest cities of the world, but of tech companies like Google or Amazon. And our guest today, Tyler Technologies Chief Financial Officer Brian Miller, has been the person making sure the ledger for the government software giant has been solid for 25 years. He's overseen dozens of acquisitions that transformed his company into a single source of solutions for the public sector. Joins us remotely today from the great state of Texas, our conversation with Brian Miller on Tyler Technologies Connected Communities, the future of municipal and state government technology, and looking back at the biggest merger in Tyler's history. It's all coming up right after this.
And now a word from Genpact, NYSE ticker G.
We are currently encountering delivery delays.
Genpact is transforming supply chains using real-time data to help manufacturers keep goods flowing from the warehouse, so cupboards are never bare at their house. We are in the relentless pursuit of a world that works better for people.
Our guest today, Brian Miller, is CFO of Tyler Technologies. That's NYSE ticker symbol TYL. He's been with the company since 1997. He's held several leadership positions. Prior to joining Tyler, Brian worked for Metro Airlines, Inc., a regional holding company operating as American Eagle. Began his career with E&Y. Welcome, Brian, inside the Ice House.
Thank you, Josh. Great to be here.
So there's no fonder memory for me than making a connection at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport from an American Airlines 757 to a de Havilland Twin Otter operated by American Eagle bound for Little Rock in one of my many visits to the great state of Arkansas. Let's start with just a moment to reflect on the great aeronautical tradition connecting through DFW.
Well, I began my post-public accounting career in the airline industry, in the regional airline industry with Metro Airlines, which was the original American Eagle provider at DFW. So we were the pioneer in that code sharing arrangements was a public company listed on NASDAQ, grew to be the largest regional airline in the country. And eventually, after a long series of twists and turns, was acquired by American. But certainly massive differences between the airline industry and the software industry, most of them in favor of the software industry.
Any sort of thunderstorm or tornado coming down to DFW is going to screw up your business for a couple of days. Do you miss the airline business at all?
It's super interesting business. And it was, during a period of a lot of growth, it was post deregulation, a lot of activity. It was a really fun business, different every day, super interesting, but an awful lot of challenges and a lot of things that are out of your control. They're capital intensive, contrasting with software. They're capital intensive, software isn't. You have unions, commodity pricing, specifically fuel, is one of your biggest costs. Pricing is generally determined by your most irrational competitor. So a lot of differences compared to software. I really enjoyed my 10 years in the airline industry, but I've been very happy with my 25 years in the software.
So Brian, you've been with Tyler Technologies since 1997, which was still known as Tyler Corporation back then, still a year away from moving into the government space when you joined. What brought you to the company from American Eagle?
As I mentioned, American was in the process of acquiring the assets of Metro Airlines. The regional airlines sort of went through stages where they were basically, as Metro was a franchisee, and although it was a separate public company, operated under the American brand. And then they sort of entered a phase where the major airlines decided they wanted to acquire all their regional airline partners. And so there was a big wave of acquisitions, and I was caught up in that. So American already had a CFO. So I was kind of ready to do something different. Tyler was just going through this transition from being a sort of an old 70s, 80s industrial conglomerate to entering the government software space. And one of our independent directors at Metro, a guy named C.A. Rundell, had been a longtime board member at Tyler and had stepped into an interim CEO role during this transition. So they were looking for a chief accounting officer, someone with M&A experience, as M&A was going to be core to Tyler's strategy. And CA knew me well, and the opportunity sounded really intriguing, even though I didn't know much about software. The business model sounded really interesting, and the strategy that they laid out sounded like something that made a ton of sense and really was something new in the market. And so I joined Tyler as chief accounting officer, stayed in that role for a few years, and moved into VP of finance, and then have been CFO for about 15 years.
Curious what you found when you got there, this company that is headquartered in Plano, really not Tyler, Texas. How was it segmented at the time you joined? What did you see when you walked in the door?
Tyler, from the mid-'60s through the mid-'90s, was sort of a classic industrial conglomerate. Its origins as Saturn Industry was as a spinoff of the old LTV Corporation, which is a big Dallas conglomerate. They had spun off some businesses into a separate company, and that became Tyler, and then went public pretty quickly after it was formed. So Tyler for 30 years was a very successful conglomerate, was a Fortune 500 company, had $1 billion in revenues when that was a lot, bought and sold lots of different businesses. The core business through that time was a company called Tyler Pipe, which was founded in Tyler, Texas, and was an iron pipe foundry, basically made cast iron sewer pipe. So that was really the core of the company. They owned companies like a company called Atlas Powder that was an explosives manufacturer, a plastic coatings business, a metal building business, a chain of auto parts stores across the Great Lakes. And so it was very successful. But then in the early 90s, conglomerates fell out of favor. And ultimately, the parts were determined to be worth more than the whole. And so Tyler went through a period where they divested businesses, spun them off, sold them, dividended a lot of money out to the shareholders. So did very well for the shareholders. The founder, a guy named Joe McKinney, retired in, I think, 1995, the mid-90s. And so Tyler was a little more than a shell company, but had some cash. It was a New York Stock Exchange listed company, but really only had a couple of businesses. And really, by the time I got there in 1997, what was left was the chain of auto parts stores called Forest City Auto Parts. But the company had, as I mentioned, a guy named C.A. Rundell had come in as interim CEO from the board to sort of help the company figure out what to do next. Another guy named Lou Waters, who was the founder of BFI, the waste management company, came on as chairman. And they really formulated the strategy of creating a national brand, a company to serve the very wide range of software and IT needs of governments, primarily local governments at the time. We've since expanded well beyond local governments. Recognizing that the market was, and CA had some sort of peripheral experience in this space, but recognized that this was a very fragmented market, a market served by a lot of local providers, niche providers, generally that served a narrow functional area of government like property taxes or financials or courts, and often focused narrowly from a geographic perspective. So companies that did court systems in New York and New Jersey or tax systems in Texas. So a lot of fragmented competition, but no real national leader, no one company that had a broad portfolio of products that scaled to serve, a wide range of sizes of governments. The business plan looked a little bit more like a roll-up, which were also more popular sort of in the late 90s. So we had this plan to bring together leading providers, which were sort of those very successful regional companies in different product areas, to bring those together under Tyler, initially through acquisitions, to grow them organically and to continue to broaden the portfolio and to create value by having multiple products and services available from one provider. And so that was when I joined the company. We had, I think, struck the deals to buy the first 3 companies, all of which were located in Texas, one in Lubbock, one in Dallas, and one in Plano. But those deals were not completed. We had to go get shareholder approval because we were issuing a lot of stock. We had to negotiate debt facility. We also were working on selling the last of the legacy businesses, which we did, I think, shortly after that. And so we did the initial 3 acquisitions in February of 1998. Those businesses served as sort of the cornerstones. And then I think over 98 and 99, we did a total of 13 acquisitions. So we were busy. We had a credit facility. We issued a lot of stock. Most of the deals were sort of half cash, half stock. So the founders of those companies, we wanted to stay at Tyler, to be thinking as owners of Tyler, to grow those businesses within Tyler. And so we executed on that. And if you look at our investor deck or look at what we do today, it would be very similar to what we would have had in an investor deck had we actually had such a thing in 1998. The strategy, it's had some twists and turns along the way, but really what we've achieved over that time frame is what we set out to do 25 years ago. It's very gratifying to look back on it and say, hey, that's kind of what they sold me on. That's what the plan was. And even though we didn't quite get there in a straight line, that's what we've achieved.
December will mark your 25th anniversary with Tyler Technologies. And as you were describing, all of the build through acquisition deals that you did in 98 and beyond, I guess one of those deals was Brazos Technology Corporation based in College Station, a municipality that uses Tyler's software. And going back before you looked at Brazos, so curious what brought you to College Station to do your education. I guess you were one of the president's endowed scholars a few years before you came to kick the tires at Brazos. What was your experience at A&M like?
Yeah, I had a great experience at A&M. If you know much about Texas A&M, Aggies are a somewhat unique group of people and have some interesting traditions and differences, what we think very different from a lot of schools. Yes, I came to A&M primarily because of scholarship, a President's Endowed Scholarship, which swayed me to looking at it, but certainly one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. Great place, great spirit, and built relationships there that have lasted a very long time. I'm still very involved in A&M. I serve on the board of directors of the 12th Man Foundation, which is the foundation that supports A&M athletics. Also been involved in some other activities down there. So still spend a lot of time there, pretty much every home game on Saturdays I'm at, and a lot of road games, but yeah, it's a great institution. And we were happy to make an acquisition in College Station. We still have an office there that supports that business unit, which has grown really nicely under Tyler. So it's nice when I do go back there, I drive past the Tyler sign in front of the Brazos office.
I'm not sure if any of the scholars that you've sponsored have joined Tyler, but in a LinkedIn search we did, it shows this steady stream of Aggies moving the 200 miles to Plano. How has your headquarters, which I think includes a former YMCA building, helped you attract and foster technology talent down in Texas?
We recruit from a lot of institutions. We're a growing company. This year, I think we're around 7,000 employees. We'll look to add about 600 net new heads, so almost 10% growth. And so we continue to hire talent, especially in the technology arena, as you'd expect. Software developers, professional services people make up a lot of our new hires. We do hire at a lot of institutions. A&M is certainly one of those that's a target school, which is very rich in technology talent. But our headquarters here in Plano, it's not actually even the largest office within Tyler. We have probably around 800 employees that would normally, now I say work in Plano, now I would just say based out of Plano because so many people are working remotely. Our largest facility actually in terms of number of employees is in the Portland, Maine area in Yarmouth and Falmouth. We have two major offices there. So we recruit people not only in Texas, but throughout the country. We have major offices in Troy, Michigan, Dayton, Ohio, Seattle, Lubbock, Texas is one of our larger offices. I'm sure I'll be leaving some off, but most of those have come through acquisitions. And so that's one of our advantages is that we hire throughout the country and have a lot of diversity in terms of where our business units are located. I would say that Tyler is typically seen as an employer of choice, particularly in those sort of smaller markets, as opposed to being in the Silicon Valley or Seattle, although we have a small presence there. So, in terms of places that are attractive to live, the Portland, Maine area, for example, is, within 2 hours of Boston, very attractive place to live. And so we're really, I think, have an advantage when it comes to hiring people. We typically make a lot of the best places to work lists around the country. And so I think we recruit well. Obviously now with remote work being a significant part of our model, we're able to recruit nationwide. People don't have to work full-time in an office. So we're a lot more flexible around that. But yeah, we're, I think, a very, very good place to work. And I think that shows through our recruiting efforts and the awards we win. About 40% of our employees have worked in the public sector in the past. And obviously, that's the customer base we serve. And so our employees really have that deep domain expertise, but also the connection to our customers because they've done their jobs before.
Brian, a recent article by a veteran corrections officer, Philip Swift, talked about the value of having what he has real-time offender information at his fingertips through Tyler's enterprise corrections solutions. I'm curious, how are corrections facilities using your software and what other capabilities are you exploring to get valuable information into accessible databases for law enforcement?
Yeah, public safety as well as courts and justice broadly are two major product areas for Tyler, functional areas that we serve. So when you think about public safety, it's police, fire, and ambulance. We do 911 systems, computer-aided dispatch, police, fire, and ambulance records, a lot of mobile applications around that. Then we move over into the correction space. So you think about the cycle of an event. There's a 911 call, there's an event or an incident, there may be an arrest. Then that moves over to the jailing. And so then that's the correction space where we have software for what you were just referring to, sort of jail management software. And then you move over into a trial. And so we have systems that manage the prosecutor's office, the actual court. So the court case management, managing all the aspects of a trial, whether it's civil or criminal or family. So all the parties and events. And then you move over. We have systems that manage the jury, that manage the prosecutor, then into probation, potentially back into corrections, and then into probation. So we're really the only company that has that full breadth of software covering the entire public safety and courts and justice function. So we're able to have integrated solutions so that the data flows throughout that entire process. The workflow goes across all of those different functional areas of the process. In corrections specifically, we're a major provider of jail management software, mostly at the city and county level. So we don't really do federal prisons or state prisons. So you're mostly thinking about a county jail or a city jail. But we have systems that really manage all the aspects of running those facilities, managing the interactions with the inmates. And we've added a lot of mobile tools, not only to our correction software and public safety software, but across all of our applications. But in this space specifically, we've made big investments in mobile tools and applications. So that the jail management software, for example, tracks inmate movements. It alerts the employees in the jail of security issues, manages threat groups, gangs, for example, manages who should be separated. And it shares information and workflow between the courts, the jail, and law enforcement. It automates tasks to make the jail run more efficiently. But as that article described, in the old days, it was a notebook in the jailer's pocket where he would go around and take down notes about what was going on, what potential incidents or someone needing attention or medical attention. And now all that takes place on a mobile application, on a handheld or a tablet, all collected in real time, provides audit trails. And so there's a lot of transparency and a lot of information. We also really made a major expansion in our offerings for the corrections space last year through the acquisition of a company called VendEngine, which is a very specific provider of services for the corrections market, added additional capabilities for Tyler in that space. And so VendEngine really provides a number of solutions for the jail space, but they provide, whether it's through kiosks, handheld devices, or tablets, video visitation, which became much more important during the pandemic. So providing access for incarcerated individuals to have access to text or have video visits or email, friends and relatives. It's been really important during COVID, but even ongoing to provide those kinds of virtual visits. And there have been a lot of studies that have proven that to the extent that inmates are able to stay more connected to friends and relatives, that they tend to be much more successful after they're released. And so recidivism is reduced. So it really has a positive impact on the population. In the last 2 years, VendEngine's provided more than 50 million free connections between inmates and their family members through texts, emails, and video visitations. Through that solution, we provide access to free educational programs, life skills programming, GED programs, provide access to law libraries, a solution for inmates to submit grievances and have those go to the management of the institution. And then we also manage the commissary, manage their funds, so enable them to buy things in the commissary and accept funds from outside individuals. So really not only provides efficiencies and cost savings for the institution, but makes life better for the incarcerated individuals and ultimately leads to more success once they're released.
You get in a car in Plano, you drive about 375 miles down Interstate 35, past San Antonio, you get to Uvalde. You look at a tragedy like we had last week and the role that a 911 system plays into that. Is that an opportunity to sort of look at it in retrospect and understand what technology was used, how it could be better and how it could be deployed better in municipalities around the country?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. We believe that by having better technology, one of our major objectives is to make communities safer, not only for the citizens, but for the first responders and the law enforcement agencies. And technology is certainly one of the ways that can be accomplished. I don't know specifically what kind of technology they had and how it played into it, but one of our initiatives is certainly a lot more mobile technology. So officers having access to data and communications, whether it's on a wrist device or a handheld device or a tablet. So outside of the car or outside of the office, having access to the same information that they could have otherwise on a timely basis. So technology certainly can improve the responses around significant events like that. For example, at our user conference a couple of years ago, we had the police chief from San Bernardino, California. And that was another place where a few years ago, there was a active shooter event. And he talked at length about how they used Tyler's computer-aided dispatch and a number of systems from Tyler and about how our system performed and helped them deal with that situation. So I think we may even have on our website some of his comments it was a really moving talk that he gave. So when you hear the first responders talk, we just had our user conference 2 weeks ago. And I attended a public safety session, and it's really interesting to hear their stories and how they deal with some of these events and how they use technology to do that. And so we think that's one of those areas where we make a real impact on how citizens' lives are affected.
To the break, Brian Miller, CFO of Tyler Technologies, and I are going to discuss how Tyler is leveraging cloud and scalability to offer municipalities, both large and small, the ability to connect with their citizens. That's all coming up right after this.
ICE is home to liquid global energy markets, including the broadest range of natural gas benchmarks from the US and Canada to Europe and Asia.
Natural gas markets are globalizing, driven by new LNG dynamics. The relationship between Europe and Asia is taking center stage in natural gas price formation. In Europe, we provide access to the two leading benchmarks, NBP and TTF.
In Asia, the Japan-Korea marker is the benchmark for pricing Northeast Asian markets. Focused on South and West Asia, ICE's West India marker LNG futures contract supports growing natural gas demand in India and the Middle East.
Against the backdrop of the U.S. shale revolution, market participants have become refocused on regional, physical, and financial gas markets. In North America, we offer the most comprehensive collection of locations and liquidity in the physical and financial gas markets.
ICE offers the most comprehensive complex of global natural gas benchmarks. These deep and diverse markets allow for transparent pricing across the globe.
Welcome back. Before the break, Brian Miller, CFO of Tyler Technologies, and I were discussing the evolution and growth of Tyler since he joined the government tech company back in 1997, celebrating his 25th year with the company this year. Brian, before the break, we were talking about the company's growth, both organic and through acquisition. Tyler Technologies surpassed $1 billion of revenue again back in 2019, leading to its inclusion in the S&P 500 in June of 2020. Where does this place you among government tech companies, and how large is the sector as a whole as an addressable market?
Yeah, we believe that we are the largest company that's solely focused on the government technology space. There are certainly companies larger than us that serve the government market as part of their business, among one of many vertical markets. But in terms of companies that are focused exclusively on government software and services, we believe we're the largest, and particularly in the local government space. The TAM is very, very large. Historically, we've been primarily focused on local governments, so cities, counties, and school districts. And the TAM for application and vertical specific software in the local government space is about $30 billion a year. So we'll be somewhere around 1.8 billion in revenues this year. So we still have a lot of runway ahead of us. It's still a very fragmented market. Now, in recent years, we have expanded our presence in the state and even dipped our toes into the federal markets. So those expand that TAM by a significant factor. Today, including business acquired through the NYSE acquisition a year ago, state makes up, I'd say, around 15% of our business, maybe close to 20% of our business. And federal is still, a single-digit percentage of our business, but much bigger presence in the state and federal business than we had, 5 years ago.
NYSE, I think, was the largest acquisition in the sector's history. I'm curious, what was the initial value proposition for Tyler in doing that deal, and how does adding all of this extra state government expertise to your arsenal open up additional opportunities for the company?
Yeah, NYSE, as you said, was our biggest acquisition to date. It was about a $2.3 billion acquisition. Also, the first time we've acquired a public company. And we've done over 50 acquisitions during the time I've been here at Tyler, but that was our first acquisition of a public company. It really had a couple of major strategic advantages to us. As I said, Tyler pre-NYSE was about 85% local government, maybe a little over 10% state and less than 5% federal. NYSE, by contrast, is about 95% state and about 5% federal and almost no local presence. So very little overlap in terms of sort of our customer base. And also we provide different things to government. So even though both companies were solely focused on the public sector space, we did different things. Tyler provides the back office software solutions that power all of these mission critical essential functions of government, like public safety or courts or property tax or financials and payroll. NYSE, on the other hand, is really sort of providing the digital access to those back-end government systems. So mostly at the state level. So NYSE provides the digital access to government, really providing state websites, and then building these connections to these back-end systems, which could come from Tyler or from some other provider, many of them homegrown systems. So really providing access for citizens to transact business or obtain information from government. NYSE has about 30 state enterprise contracts where they provide a wide range of digital government services. But you think about things like renewing your driver's license or your motor vehicle registration, or getting a hunting or fishing license, or applying for unemployment benefits. All those kinds of things you would do with government, and very often would have to go down to the DMV office, which is never high on somebody's list of fun things to do, or mail in a check or in a form. So NYSE digitizes all that, builds those connections to the back-end systems, and provides the ability for citizens and businesses to transact business more efficiently with government or obtain information. And then they also have a very large payment processing business, which generally, if those transactions involve a payment, NYSE is doing that processing. So the year we acquired them, they processed about $24 billion of payments for state governments. We've added some significant contracts, including payment processing for all of the state of Florida government. So we now probably are approaching $75 billion in annual payment processing. So those things really balanced out with what complemented what Tyler already did in the government space. And so the combination is very powerful, and it creates a lot of cross-selling or sell-through opportunities to leverage each other's strengths. So Tyler has dozens of software applications that have applicability at the state level, but we have not had those relationships, the sales organizations, really the focus on the state market. NYSE does. And so we believe that we can accelerate the penetration of Tyler products into the state market through these NYSE relationships and contracts. And then Tyler had strategic initiatives around payments, but it was in the very early stages. So a lot of our systems at the local level facilitate payments, particularly traffic tickets through our municipal court system, utility bills. We're a big provider of utility billing systems, licensing and permitting. So a lot of things at the local level where our systems facilitate payments, but we haven't participated in those payment streams. And so with the NYSE acquisition came a very robust payments platform that was designed specifically for government. Great reporting capabilities, a great mobile platform called Gov2Go. And so a lot of capabilities that Tyler would have looked to have built out over coming years that came ready-made through the NYSE acquisition. So we believe that we can take their really strong payment processing capabilities that they're providing at the state level and drive those into the local government space, into cities and counties through our relationships. And so we've seen some really good early successes in sell-throughs in the first year, but the opportunities in front of us are really exciting. And both the NYSE team are working together to pursue those opportunities, and they continue to grow well beyond what we envisioned when we made the acquisition.
I mean, talking about the opportunities in front of you, Brian, at first blush, with a certain number of states that it serves, NYSE's core business might seem capped, but how does things like the legislation that would legalize cannabis provide for potential growth?
Cannabis is certainly one of the areas actually that NYSE has a focus on. NYSE, in addition to providing their online access, has a handful of software products that are used at the state level. And one of those is a system that is used around the regulation of cannabis. So NYSE already has a product there, has been able to expand that. I think recently signed a significant contract with the state of Mississippi to provide that solution around managing all the aspects of the cannabis regulation that's new to a lot of states. And so those kinds of opportunities where we can build something in one state and then expand it across a number of other states that have similar needs is one of the exciting opportunities around having such a broad set of customers that have often very similar needs from state to state, but have historically approached these things with one-off custom builds, and make that much quicker and more efficient with less internal support needed as we provide these systems like a cannabis regulation solution. We're really excited about having added those capabilities. We also have, NYSE provides campground reservations for a lot of the national parks and the payments that are associated with those. So that's been an area where we really think we've gone from being one of a number of providers to being the leading provider in the space. And as I said, with the uptick in outdoor recreation activities that came during the pandemic, it's very timely for us.
You were mentioning before the break, I think that you had now resumed, I think after a couple of years hiatus because of COVID, your Tyler Connect conference held this year in Indianapolis. And we see this as well. We have our own experience conference where we get to meet with our customers and clients face to face, take a lot of learnings back. Conferences are a great place to have the dialogue between client and provider. What are some of the takeaways that you wanted customers to take away from Connect 22 after finally getting together with them again?
Yeah, after a 2-year hiatus and going to virtual conferences, which we think we did a really good job of and had really strong attendance virtually, all of the Tyler team, as well as our customers from across the country, felt really good to be back together in person. It was a really high energy event, very positive. I think people really, really appreciated being back together. A lot of our focus was around our move to the cloud, updating customers on what that means for Tyler and what that means for them and what those advantages are, kind of what our timetable is and what they should expect to see from us. So Tyler is we've talked about publicly over the last couple of years, is really accelerating our cloud transition, moving from what years ago was primarily an on-premises business where most of our customer base still has systems that are installed on site on their servers and they're managing that infrastructure. And so we're increasingly moving those systems into the cloud, and our partner AWS, our primary public cloud hosting partner going forward. And so we're not only moving our on-premises customers over time into AWS, but we're moving customers that are currently hosted in our data centers to AWS. Over these next few years. A lot of benefits for customers, and particularly local governments who often struggle with managing complex IT resources. Going back to what you talked about in your town in the Catskills at the beginning, it's really hard for governments, particularly smaller governments, to hire, retain, pay market rates for people who are highly technical in the IT space. And so they struggle with the infrastructure. They struggle with security. By us providing a path to the cloud for them, we think we can solve a lot of those problems, make their operations more efficient, and make Tyler's operations more efficient as we move through that transition. So a lot of our updates were around that. There certainly is a growing enthusiasm for systems in the cloud in our space. Last year, more than 80% of our new customer contract value came to us through the cloud. And just 3 years ago, it topped 50% for the first time. So we've made tremendous progress in the last couple of years, and really have a big push over the next couple of years as we move to almost exclusively providing systems in the cloud.
I mean, talking about moving into the cloud, maybe you and I can just zoom in on a particular case study for a second, because Harrisburg, Pennsylvania recently announced that it had selected Tyler's enterprise resource planning solution to replace several of the providers that they were using. What is Tyler's connected communities vision, and is Harrisburg a perfect example of the streamlining that you're hoping to bring to local governments across the country?
Yeah, it really is. And we've really talked about connected communities starting back in 2017 as really a vision that we felt that Tyler was in a unique position to help communities fulfill. So we really, when we look at what we call a connected community, we really think that is achieved when residents and governments are active participants in making a community work and thrive together. So there's technology interconnectivity is one piece of that puzzle. But when people feel like that they're partners in a community in driving public safety and participation, openness, then they feel a sense of ownership, they feel confidence, they feel more peace of mind. And so we think that, this is sort of a noble goal, we think, being able to connect citizens in a community. And it's really moving from sort of a vision to a practice. As I said, about 5 years ago, we first started talking about this vision. We've made a lot of progress. And so it's really about connecting departments within a jurisdiction. So a lot of data and systems in governments are very siloed today. So governments struggle with or being able to use data out of these multiple silos to make good decisions, to drive safety in the community, to provide more transparency to citizens, and to be able to engage citizens. So we want to connect departments within a jurisdiction. We want to connect jurisdictions within a region. And then we want to connect different levels of government. So connect local, state, and federal. So enable them to share data to have transparency across all those jurisdictions. So we've done a lot of work sort of at the base level with the underlying technology. So we've created a lot of common technologies across Tyler products, whether it's a common sign-on and security or a common workflow engine or payment platform, to improve the citizen experience and to make the government experience more efficient. So if you think about, going to your city's website, and you might have a number of different kinds of interactions you want to do. You might need to renew a alarm permit. You might want to apply for a business license, pay a traffic ticket, sign up to pay a utility bill. You might be able to do those things through your city's website, but once you get there, you'll get routed into different back-end systems where you might have a different sign-on and a different password, and the screen looks completely different. So the city doesn't really know you as a citizen on an overall basis. Part of Connected Communities is providing dashboards and streamlining that access for the public to their cities and counties, and then tying those things together to make data more available to decision makers to make smarter decisions around how they run a government, and ultimately, provide a better experience for citizens and provide greater transparencies. Again, we think that Tyler is in a very unique position to execute on this vision, and we've made a lot of progress over the last 5 years. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're really finding that our clients are enthusiastic about what that vision can provide and what those benefits are for both the internal operations and for their citizens. Again, we think Tyler's really the only company with the breadth of products and the kinds of technologies that can make that happen. And so, Harrisburg would be a great example of that, as they replace multiple legacy systems with a integrated system on the Tyler platform. And as we continue to make progress on the underlying technologies, and as we continue to broaden our portfolio of products, whether it's through acquisitions or internal builds, that we only create more and more value to that proposition of being able to bring things together on a unified platform.
Creating more and more value to bring things together on the unified platform of Connected Communities. What a great tour through what is going on at Tyler Technologies. Brian, thanks so much for joining us inside the Ice House.
Thank you, Josh.
That's our conversation for this week. Our guest was Brian Miller, CFO of Tyler Technologies. That's NYSE ticker symbol TYL. If you like what you heard, please rate us on iTunes so other folks know where to find us. And if you've got a comment or a question you'd like one of our experts to tackle on a future show, email us at icehouse@ice.com or tweet at us at IceHousePodcast. Our show is produced by Peter Ash with production assistance from Stephen Romanchik, Ken Abel, and Ian Wolf. I'm Josh King, your host, signing off from the library of the New York Stock Exchange. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
Information contained in this podcast was obtained in part from publicly available sources and not independently verified. Neither ICE nor its affiliates make any representations or warranties, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information, and do not sponsor, approve, or endorse any of the content herein, all of which is presented solely for informational and educational purposes. Nothing herein constitutes an offer to sell, a solicitation of an offer to buy any security, or a recommendation of any security or trading practice. Some portions of the preceding conversation may have been edited for the purpose of length or clarity.